Hey, welcome back to the Summit Independent Insurance Podcast. I'm here with Tim Coughlin, founder and owner of Summit Insurance. Last week, we spoke about travel and medical insurance outside of the country. Today, we're going to be going over that in some more detail. Tim, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Jack. We're getting a lot of questions about traveling outside of the US with Medicare. And I even had one client reach out and said, "Hey, my wife and I are going over to live in Italy for a year." Most people are going for anywhere from 10 days to a month when traveling.
Yeah, so there's several questions that I think are common questions that people have. And primarily, I guess the first thing would be for Medicare recipients. Does Medicare cover me outside of the US?
That's a good question. No, Medicare really can't be covering people that are either traveling or living all over different parts of the world. So the short answer is no. There are a few very kind of rare exceptions where you're outside of the country, but you're closer to a facility in the neighboring country, or situations with cruise ships or US territory. So the main answer would be no, Medicare doesn't cover you while you're traveling outside of the country.
Maybe we can get into Medicare supplements and coverage outside of the country because I know a lot of people with supplements have those questions.
The three most popular Medicare supplements are known as Medigap plans. Plan F, Plan G, and Plan N provide up to 50,000 of emergency medical coverage while traveling outside of the United States. Again, it is for emergency medical situations. There's no coverage for routine medical, and it's a coverage is 80/20. The Medicare supplement, excuse me, is going to pay 80%, but the insured is going to pay 20%. And then the policies have a lifetime maximum of $50,000 of benefits for when you're traveling outside of the United States. And that's only during the first 60 days while you're outside of the country. So, in the case of the person I mentioned earlier, where they're going to be living in Italy for a year, and they're basically their supplement would be a possibly cover them for the first 60 days, but after that, there would be no coverage.
Okay. And what about a Medicare Advantage plan? Do some of those have supplemental travel insurance? Because I know with Advantage plans, sometimes they have add-ons. Is that a normal benefit for an Advantage plan to have international travel benefits?
Most of them do, but there can be low dollar limits, like maybe $10,000. They're all over the board with Medicare Advantage, I find. Some of them have very generous out of the country emergency medical benefits, and some of them have very limited emergency medical benefits. A huge amount of Medicare Advantage plans with different benefits. In California, there's hundreds of different Medicare Advantage plans. So it would be important to check your specific coverage if you have a Medicare Advantage plan, and also to keep in mind that that again is just for emergencies. So once you're stabilized, there's not going to be any coverage for that situation.
Okay, that's important to know. And so basically, I think that this is the conclusion that you and I arrive on is that if traveling outside of the country, it's a good idea to get supplemental travel insurance. But maybe we can go into a little bit about the supplemental travel insurance. Typically, people think about travel insurance, they think about, okay, if I miss my flight, maybe I lose a bag. But the medical part is, in my opinion, a lot more important because those type of situations that can arise can be a lot more grave, have larger monetary consequences. What type of travel insurance should people get? Where can they get it?
I can't tell you how many people and clients we have that have either been injured or gotten sick while traveling. Maybe it's the stress of traveling. People are in strange environments. I had a couple that come to mind. I've had at least three people who have fallen. One person slipped in the shower in Costa Rica, broke her hip, and required major surgery. Another client is badly hurt scrambling over rocks in Mexico. And I've had somebody else fall in Portugal. And also, in terms of sickness, I've had people get very sick. One lady in London got viral meningitis, really serious. Another lady had heart failure. For some reason, these things come up while traveling. Even if you have the 50,000 with your Medigap plan, it does go further in the country you're in, but that's for emergency treatment. One person that comes to mind that did exhaust her 50,000 of coverage. She was hospitalized twice and ended up exceeding the policy limit. So it's very important. One of the things where it can be very expensive is if you need medical evacuation back to the United States. So imagine you're in Italy and you suffer some type of a catastrophic health event. You have to get back to the United States and you have to you require special transportation. Sometimes you have to be accompanied by a medical professional or need a special seat, like a bed. That can get very expensive. That's where travel medical insurance comes in. And that was a good point, Jack, that people are going to want to consider that, pay attention to the coverage for the medical portion of their trip. It can be relatively affordable. You and I have used it before when traveling out of the country. It's important to work with an expert in travel medical insurance, particularly for older people on Medicare. Make sure what the coverage is going to provide for any type of pre-existing conditions and to make sure that they have a clear understanding of whether or not the policy would apply to a pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
And also, is it going to be the primary insurance or is it going to be secondary to Medicare insurance? Have a special limit for medical evacuation? Those type of policy questions, it would be important to really have a good understanding of that. And some provisions like the pre-existing condition provision may be contingent on when you purchase the policy. You don't wait till the last minute to check medical coverage if you're traveling outside of the United States.
Yes, that's a very important thing. So I was doing a little bit of research about this, and from my perspective, it appears that basically all the plans are going to have stipulations when it comes to pre-existing conditions. Now, some of them flat out don't cover pre-existing conditions, and all of them essentially have definitions of what is a pre-existing
Right. That's
condition,
right.
the time limits on pre-existing conditions, that sort of thing. But you can purchase plans that do cover pre-existing conditions. But what's really important is you can't just purchase a plan that covers pre-existing conditions and, oh, okay, everything is okay, because normal health insurance plans, the devil's in the details. You need to look at the numbers and how that's covered, what they consider a pre-existing condition, how they define that. It is very important to use a program that can give you those details. We talked about Square Mouth. They offer a
Yeah.
list of those details and allow you to compare those plans. So it's really important to pay attention to pre-existing conditions because that's covered it in every plan, because that's something people think about are those pre-existing conditions.
Up to about 6 or 7 years ago, I'm licensed. I can sell travel medical plans. We would get asked from time to time, but I determined I was not knowledgeable enough to feel comfortable doing that for clients. We had a limited number of policies we could sell around 5, 6 years ago. We started referring people to Square Mouth. And people always ask, what's the name of that company? It is unusual, but I found them to be outstanding. They represent a huge number of different companies and they're very efficient, so you can get detailed policy information. But one of the things I found is that I've had really good success also calling them and speaking to their representatives and asking questions about the different policy provisions. I would highly recommend Squaremouth, and if you would, Jack, leave a link to Squaremouth in the description so that if people do want to get travel medical insurance, use our affiliate link. It'll take you right to Squaremouth. You can check out the policies, and like I said, they are quite accessible by phone, which is nice.
Tim, before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to when we first started talking, and you mentioned the couple that wanted to live in Italy. That brings me to my last question. How will my Medicare coverage be affected if I travel outside of the US for an extended period?
That is a good question. It depends on the details, but a lot of people try to keep their Medicare. And so they're going to have to determine whether or not they're going to keep their Medicare and if that's feasible based on their travel. Part B of Medicare has a monthly premium. So if you're not covered by Medicare, sometimes people don't want to pay that premium. The other side of that is that if you go and drop your Part B of Medicare, then you could be subject to a late enrollment penalty when you come back to the United States, or you can only re-sign up for the Part B generally during the general enrollment periods. You can get Medicare reactivated again. So if people are going to be living outside of the United States, it's definitely an important consideration and something you want to do a lot of research and make a decision about Medicare.
Yeah, that's great, Tim. Did you have any other things that you wanted to mention before we wrap up? I appreciate your insight on these things, but did you have anything that I might have missed here?
Yeah, I'll mention that on the Square Mouth policies, they I believe have policies that will cover people for up to a year. So that may be a short-term solution. We referred people living permanently outside the United States to Peterson International Insurance. Look them up if you're out of the country for an extended period of time.
Okay, that's great, Tim. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too, Jack. Thank you.